Imagine a simple urine test, the kind your child would do at home, that helps identify whether your child has autism. It works by measuring a specific biological signature in the gut. So in the study Christina and her team published last fall, 9 out of 10 children with autism had that specific signature. None of the typically developing children did.
P-Cresol itself is a molecule that can disable an enzyme called dopamine beta hydroxylase. Dopamine beta hydroxylase is the enzyme that converts dopamine to norepinephrine. So what happens is one molecule of p-Cresol will completely disable this enzyme permanently. I want every single autism parent to know they did nothing wrong and this isn't their fault. It took me 10 years to say that out loud, but once I did, I was finally able to make progress with my life. Again, you did nothing wrong. This isn't your fault. Don't blame yourself. We would turn a neurodevelopmental disability into a preventable illness.
Welcome back to Biohacking Autism. I'm Nadia Al-Khatib, and today's guest reached out to me a few weeks ago. And the moment I saw what she's been working on, I knew I needed to bring her into this conversation. Imagine a simple urine test, the kind your child would do at home, that helps identify whether your child has autism. It works by measuring a specific biological signature in the gut. So in the study Christina and her team published last fall, 9 out of 10 children with autism had that specific signature. None of the typically developing children did. So that test exists now. Yay. And the woman who built it is sitting with me today. So Christina Flynn earned her PhD in chemical engineering at Arizona State University, ASU, this past December, working under Professor James Adams on a dissertation that built the MDM System, a diagnostic screening tool for autism using microbially derived metabolites, MDM, in urine. So she's now the research director at Autism Diagnostics Lab, where the test is offered today. We'll talk about it some more. She's also the lead author on a review paper published in February of this year on p-Cresol, one of the most studied gut-derived metabolites in autism. And I want to mention this with care because it's part of Christina's story that I find most powerful. She's also a mom, and her son Nico is 14, level 3, nonverbal. The science she's doing in the lab is the same science that she lives at home. Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you, Nadia.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So let's start where I think we just have to start here. I want to talk about Nico. He's 14. He's profoundly affected with autism, which was the case for Jimmy. So tell me about the moment you decided that being a chemical engineer was going to become part of how you actually took care of him.
Well, that actually is kind of an interesting story. So I had my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering when I found out I was pregnant with him. So I went into labor with him during a final for one of my master's degree classes.
Wow.
The only B- that I got in the entire program. Just
Nico.
yeah. So I went ahead, finished that, and then his needs started to make it so that it was very, very difficult to work. So fast forward about 5 years later, trying everything that was traditionally offered, ABA therapies, speech therapy, occupational therapy, he did not respond well to most of the treatments. So after trying and failing to give him the life that I wanted him to have, I figured I needed to go back to school and see what I could do. I had a biochemistry background, and because of his needs and my inability to work, I had a knack for reading about the biochemistry of autism. So I spent about 4 years doing that before I finally worked up the courage to reach out to my hero, Dr. Adams. And on a volunteer basis, he took me on, and things spiraled from there.
Wow, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, I always say we're chemical reactions. So really, right? We're all these chemical reactions. So, but that story is literally exactly why parents listening to this should trust this conversation, right? So let's get into the work itself. You earned your PhD this past December at ASU, working under James Adams and designing a urinary diagnostic for autism, a urinary test. So, in plain language, what does that mean? What were you measuring, and why urine, not blood or saliva?
I'll take your first question first. So I did a lot of literature review, and I'm talking thousands of studies before I had even reached out to Dr. Adams. So I had some ideas about what was going on, in the biochemistry behind the autism, but I designed it basically using a whole bunch of research studies. There's 50 different urinary research studies alone. That doesn't include feces or plasma or any other compartment that show that these microbially derived metabolites are elevated in children with autism. P-Cresol specifically, which is kind of where I started my literary work, I found that it was never lower. It was always higher in 6 different countries around the world. Every single study that tested for it found that it was higher in autism, and that's just in urine. So when I put that study together, and shout out to my other advisor, Dr. Crush Brown from Arizona State University. She made sure that when I put that paper together, it was rigorously done. So I started looking for other metabolites like it, things like yeast-based markers, things like other bacterial markers. And why urine? Because it's cheap, it's disposable. You don't have to stick, a child to get their blood. And so to me, it seemed like the ideal fluid to do something, which is my ultimate goal, which is universal screening for autism.
Yes.
If we could diagnose or at least triage children at the age of 2 instead of at the age of 5, think about how much different this world would be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially, and we'll talk about it later, because there's actionable items that can be, extrapolated from it. So I think it's absolutely amazing. So, and I agree with the urine test, because a lot of our kids, one of their biggest issues is anxiety. So now you add to it sticking them with the needle, it's hard. So a urine test is definitely much easier, very, very feasible. So now we have the urine test, and that measures something very specific. And we'll get into details later, but you talked about it. So I want to spend a moment on why this matters at all, because so many parents in our audience, they're exhausted. They're exhausted by just behavioral diagnosis. It's like, how can you even measure that? And what does it mean? And it changes all the time. So those behavioral diagnoses, it doesn't tell them anything biological about their child. And by the way, that's my goal with this podcast, is to focus on the medical side, the medical symptoms, the actual biological issues, which is frankly the root cause. But so why does measuring something specific in the gut actually matter for understanding autism and the symptoms of autism?
So the gut-brain axis is very well established as a bidirectional communication network that influences each organ. The microbially derived metabolites that I focus on are derived from tryptophan and phenylalanine. So they affect dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, adrenaline, noradrenaline, right? Neurotransmitters that we know are very involved in sleep dysregulation, neurotransmitters that can be involved in all sorts of mood problems. So that's why I chose those. I also found that they were just very, very different, and you could actually draw a line in many cases, and all of the typical children would be below a certain level, and some, but not all, because autism is a spectrum disorder of, many different origins. Yep. Some, but not all of the autistic kids would be below that line, but a subset would be above it. So if you started looking at that, you could start to see microbial patterns that were different in each kid. And when you put them all together, I realized that, okay, you add arabinitol, which is a hallmarker for yeast. You add p-Cresol or p-Cresol sulfate actually in urine, because that one is toxic in so many ways. Indoxyl sulfate, you sum up all of these different metabolites, and you find that 90% of children with autism have at least one, some up to, near the amount on the panel
Yeah,
at
what a
the very
pattern.
high end.
It's a clear
Yeah.
pattern. It's like right there. Once you have the data, you can see the pattern, right? And then you can act on it. So that's absolutely amazing. So okay, so let's get into the substance of what you found and that you were talking about. So in your paper, you said found that around 90% of children with autism in the cohort had one or more elevated MDM, microbially derived metabolites. So what is an MDM? Just so people can understand. So it's not a blood test. It's not like zinc or magnesium. It's microbially derived metabolite. And why you were saying p-Cresol is very harmful. So why is it harmful when it's high, this metabolite?
So a microbially derived metabolite is just a chemical that we do not ingest and that our bodies cannot make. The only source of it is our microbiome. So that's why I kind of focused on that, because it was coming from somewhere, especially in these very large numbers for some children. And we can't explain why without the microbiome. So p-Cresol, I can give you the most detail on. P-Cresol is created by various bacteria, including Clostridia, among others. But it can be, it is immediately absorbed into the intestinal wall, where it goes to the liver for sulfation. Sulfate, as we know, is one of the most studied, kind of biomarkers, and the sulfation process is one of the most interesting in autism, because it's always been different. We've noticed since Rosemary Waring wrote a study in 1999 or 2000 where she noticed that the average kid with autism had twice the sulfate in their urine that a typically developing child had. She also did some probes with acetaminophen to find out, and found out that they do not sulfate it like typical children do. So, the sulfate, the p-Cresol sulfate itself, is actually more toxic, if not a little bit less, but it's still very toxic to brain, body, mitochondria, and it does all sorts of nasty stuff, especially in the kidneys. It creates so much oxidative stress that in renal failure, there was a study that was done that showed that you could predict mortality rates just based on the levels of p-Cresol sulfate and indoxyl sulfate.
Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. And it's terrible because, we're always working like upstream, right? We're always working on oxalate issues and, yeast and things like this, but we're not looking downstream at literally that chemical that's sitting right there. And it's not hard to test it. I mean, the test is right there. It's a urine test. That's absolutely amazing. So by the way, this question is not abstract for me because p-Cresol specifically came up on Jimmy's labs, and I went back to my ton of testing. And years ago, I even went 2007 and before that, and I had no idea what to do with that specific metabolite that was really high. And I had no idea what to do with that information at the time. So I want to bring our audience along with us on this one. So p-Cresol, like you said, is the most studied of these compounds, including by you and your lab. So 17 of 17 studies have found
urine studies.
Urine?
Just urine.
But that's still 17 of 17. That's like 100%, if my math is correct. So what does p-Cresol actually do? So you said what it does in the body is that it's going to harm the mitochondria and do all of that. But what does it actually do? It's going to be in the gut, and then it's going to go into the bloodstream. What does it do, and why does it matter for parents trying to understand the behaviors? So not maybe the chemical reactions, but what does it look like on the outside when you have high p-Cresol?
So you have severe dopamine dysregulation, and that, in my experience, that part I'm not an expert on. P-Cresol itself is a molecule that can disable an enzyme called dopamine beta hydroxylase. Dopamine beta hydroxylase is the enzyme that converts dopamine to norepinephrine. So what happens is one molecule of p-Cresol will completely disable this enzyme permanently.
Permanently.
Yes. Now there is enzyme turnover. Your body doesn't keep it forever, but that particular enzyme is now just garbage and cannot do its function with dopamine. It can't turn it into noradrenaline. It can't turn it into adrenaline. All of the rest of the downstream metabolism from that point is disrupted, and that's, I think, a part of the reason why dopamine is so involved. When you look at the metabolism of both dopamine and serotonin, they cross over a lot, especially at their very final step. The same enzyme that makes dopamine also makes serotonin.
Yeah.
So as soon as you have too much dopamine, as a chemical engineer, right, you're thinking about what happens when you're pulling product or you're adding extra reactant to a biochemical system, and you start to see where the dysregulation comes in.
Wow. By the way, again, going back upstream. So for my case, and I literally have a test right here waiting for me for Jimmy. So that's my son with autism. He's 21. I've done a lot of Dutch tests. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dutch test, but it measures neurotransmitters and also how you use your hormones, but also your neurotransmitters. But I've always tried to work like upstream from there, where I see, yes, a lot of dysregulation, including cortisol, you say it, norepinephrine, so like basically we're trying to manage his anxiety, but his cortisol is really high at sometimes, really low at other times, and his neurotransmitters are all over the place. So we're trying to plug these holes, frankly, with all kinds of things, with supplements and meditation and all of this. But now we have this little metabolite that's like wrecking everything downstream. That's the root cause. And really, my attention, instead of up there trying to plug I have this colander with all these leaks that I'm trying to plug, I should go downstream, just turn off the faucet of the p-Cresol.
That's MTT.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. Thank you. Like, honestly, you just probably saved me like 10 years of my life. So, okay. So that really helps me see, why naming this really, really matters. Okay. So my next question is, you proposed naming a new phenotype, which I love, in the paper, ASD-MDM, autism associated with microbially derived metabolites. So why is naming a phenotype clinically important and why does it offer caregivers who feel like the autism diagnosis alone, it's like autism, go away now, why alone it hasn't given them anything actionable?
It's for the very simple point that it will give them something actionable. When you stratify by phenotype, you can guide treatment much more effectively. If you have a test for something, you can figure out I don't want to say correlation or causation, but you can find, certain ways to treat that subphenotype. Think about Rett syndrome. Think about Fragile X. They usually get different, treatment courses than idiopathic autism. Well, what we're thinking is idiopathic autism might be microbially derived metabolite version of it. So once you start stratifying into those who have high levels of microbially derived metabolites, you can start to use actionable items like probiotics, prebiotics. You have to identify the problem in the source. Is it yeast? Is it mold? Is it bacteria? But once you have that information, you can use it to consider some kind of detoxification, like activated charcoal in very small quantities. You can start to see if you would need some kind of antifungal treatment. You can start to see what would work for your child, because otherwise you're just throwing a dart at a wall.
Which is literally, again, that colander. That's what we end up doing. We need data. We need data for direction, because honestly, time and money is limited. And when we have this whole open, wide horizon in front of us, we're ready to run, but we need to know what direction to run towards. We just don't know. So that's why we need that specific data. Okay. So if we stay with the chemistry for one more question. So I want our audience to understand the breadth of what's happening in the gut, right? So Indoxyl sulfate is the other big one, the tryptophan derived compound, right? Okay, so what is it doing also biochemically that connects gut bacteria to the neurological symptoms, the kinds of symptoms that parents with children with autism are watching every day?
If you perform the same reaction on tryptophan that you did on phenyl or tyrosine, you end up with indoxyl sulfate instead of p-Cresol sulfate.
Okay.
So that's kind of the connection there. But that one we think affects serotonin more. Usually we tend to find it in lower quantities, but it, in my opinion, is more toxic because it also has oral hydrocarbon receptor activation properties.
Hydrocarbon receptor?
The oral hydrocarbon receptor.
Okay, so before we go to the next question, I just want to do a quick pause for something important. Everything you're hearing in this conversation, including the science, the mechanisms, and the discussions of testing, but also the treatments, is for educational purposes only. It's not medical advice. Christina is a researcher, not your child's doctor. I'm not your doctor either. So if anything we discuss feels relevant to your family's situation, please bring it to a qualified clinician. Now you're going to go with an educated background. So bring it to a qualified clinician that knows your child. And now let's get back to it. So this one is also personal for me, by the way. So Jimmy had elevated arabinitol on his labs more than once over the years. And the yeast piece is something I've worked on so hard. I mean, really, he's on a very strict diet, no sugar. Like he can't even have fruit, by the way, like no sugar at all. The only sugar he has is xylitol, which actually kills the yeast. Both we used herbal and pharmaceutical antifungals, all of them. But it still sneaks up. So let's bring our audience into this. Yeast-derived metabolites, arabinitol and tartaric acid and citramalic acid, were elevated in roughly 17% of the children in your cohort. So most parents don't realize that fungi are even in this conversation, but they are. So what should they understand?
They should understand that fungi form very thick biofilms on the inside of your intestinal walls. That's why they're so difficult to treat, get rid of, and all of the problems that come with them. When you take antibiotics, okay, especially in early life, yeast flourishes because there's no more competition. So if it has the ability to set up very, very well, and can kind of get a really thick biofilm on there, the chances of being able to alter that later in life go down. But that's why this test is important, because it will give you information that you can take to your doctor. This is not a test that's a standalone in any way. This is something that may guide treatment, but only under the care of your physician. It gives your physician a place to look.
Of course. Huge place to look, like a huge clue. It's a huge clue that you can't just like ignore, and just absolutely cannot ignore. Okay. So this raises something that also I want our caregivers to hear. A lot of these children appear to have decreased, you talked about it a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper in that, sulfation capacity, right? Which means that they cannot excrete these compounds as well. So in practical terms for parents, does that tell us anything about Epsom salt baths, which a lot of parents do to their kids to calm them down, frankly, or sulfate-rich foods, or even some supplements?
Absolutely. Magnesium sulfate baths are my favorite way to get it into the kid, just because of transdermal absorption. Seawater. Sulfate is the fourth most abundant compound in seawater. But we all drink bottled water, which has absolutely no sulfate in it. We used to drink river water. We used to drink well water. That has sulfate in it. There's no sulfate in bottled water. Zero. Absolutely zero. So that's one hiccup. But there's also this problem of needing more sulfate than we have. So because of the levels of, p-Cresol, Indoxyl, other precursors that require sulfation in the body, I don't necessarily see that every single child with autism has a sulfation problem. I think it's just overtaxed. It's overworked.
Okay, so they still need all of those maybe supplements and the baths and stuff. It's just what they're doing with it in their body, and then how it's excreted once it's used. Okay. Love that. So let's, and that can be tested. So that's wonderful. Just again, another clue to look into. So let's move on from what's happening in the body to what the test actually does. So the MDM system achieved 90% sensitivity and 100% specificity. So for parents who don't work with those terms, what does that actually mean when their child gets a result back?
So, when your results come back, obviously the first thing you should do is consult with your physician. See what their interpretation of it. MAPS physicians, functional medicine pediatricians, anybody with like a naturopathic kind of viewpoint, you might want to call them and see how they feel if your child's primary care physician isn't really interested. And it's something that you can do. But when I say that it achieved 90% sensitivity, I mean that using the methodology that I did for both cohorts, by the way, I found that I could pick up 90% of those with autism without picking up a single child without autism.
Exactly. Okay, so you guys find a doctor that either has knowledge of all these pathways or something very rare, and it's called intellectual curiosity. Someone would be willing to learn, about it. What a novel concept. So I'll move on. So the test is now available through Autism Diagnostics Lab. So walk us through what it looks like. So for a parent, how do they get the kit? How do they collect the sample? And what comes back to them? And by the way, our audience is pretty, US centric, of course, but we have a lot of international listeners as well.
Sure. So like I said, from Autism Diagnostics Laboratory, we anticipate May of 2026 accepting samples. But for right now, Analogous, our partner, what you do is you go online, you go to their website, analogous.com, by the way, shout out. You ordered the test. You can either order just a regular gut health test, or you can order one with an autism screener rider. So it has a little bit more going on, and it'll give you, a little bit more information about whether or not it's positive or negative, not just gut health issues, because it's different. You can have gut health issues without necessarily being autistic. Mm-hmm. It's a much higher threshold if you want to take the autism screener kind of aid, shall we say. So you get a kit in the mail from them. It includes a prepaid return prepaid return envelope. It includes a test tube. It includes a urine kit, or urine collection cup, and you can just take your child's pee. We just need a little tiny bit of it that comes back in the tube. And then we process it. You put it back into its original shipping container, and we have a video on it, so like an unboxing video.
Yeah.
So that you'll see all the parts of it. You put it into the freezer overnight. You take it the next day to any FedEx location. You drop it off, and then in about 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get your results by email, secure email.
Wonderful. You get the report. Okay. Does it have to be first thing in the morning, or any urine?
Yes, it needs to be first morning urine. Ideally, we understand that not all children can stay dry through the night, but we absolutely prefer it.
Okay. Wonderful. Love that. Okay. And we'll put all of this in the show notes, you guys. So definitely you'll have access to all of this. So let's move to what families can actually do with now this information. They get the report. So if a child tests positive for elevated MDMs, what does that actually change? What does the path from a positive result to a treatment plan look like in real life but you're also giving not just the positive, negative, you're giving a breakdown of some of these metabolites, obviously.
Absolutely, because we want you to know your levels. It's very important, and it's going to be so much more important in the future. Personalized medicine is the way of the future. You can't treat a disease unless you know somebody has it, and you can't treat any problem unless you know that they have it. Otherwise, your efficacy of any treatment that you do develop, especially for a complex neurodevelopmental disorder, is you're throwing darts at the wall.
Exactly.
So, what we try to do with our diagnostic screen is give not just the parents, but also the doctors an idea of what to do. Probiotics for bacteria, hopefully MTT, that is the goal. That is what we're working on. We're trying to fundraise for our phase 3 clinical trial.
Oh, phase 3 already. Wow.
We've done 6 studies so far on MTT. We are in the process of writing up 3 of them. So be on the lookout for those. We've done them in children and in adults. So they have excellent promise in the adult study that we just did.
Okay, because again, I've gone down so many paths, and this is where my eyes are like firmly on this, right? So MTT, this part of the story, I think, honestly, most parents in our audience have been waiting to hear. So James Adams' team with you have been running MTT, Microbiota Transplant Therapy, which used to be called Fecal transplant.
Microbiome therapy.
Microbiome therapy. Okay. So they've been running the trials. You guys have been running the trials at ASU for years. I didn't realize 10 years. Okay. I didn't realize it was 10 years. Wow. So the published results, they show p-Cresol sulfate dropping. So even if we forget about the diagnosis, which you just said, I'm like super stuck on that. I'm going to focus here, get back to the metabolites. Okay. P-Cresol sulfate dropping to normal alongside significant GI and behavioral improvements, which again, that's when people can lose their diagnosis. It can happen. I mean, it's mind blowing. That's where we need to be going. Like literally, that's it. Okay. So walk us through what MTT actually is. So if someone has never heard of it, so where it sits with the FDA right now,
Yes.
and what families with a child with autism should realistically expect on access and timing.
So we are currently fundraising for phase 3 clinical trials.
Okay.
We are a public university and not a pharmaceutical company. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, this wouldn't have taken so long. But it costs a lot of money. We're talking, multiple millions of dollars to run a phase 3 clinical study.
Talking about? How many $1 million do you need?
30 to 50.
30 to 50 for phase 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at $30 to $50 million for phase 3. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes. As soon as we get the money, we can start scheduling the phase 3 right then. So we're just waiting on funding for that. So realistically on time, that's going to be the biggest factor. Okay. What it is it's a 12-week protocol. Now this is subject to change as we go along. That's why we've done, I want to say 4 phase 2s to get a dosing study, to validate it on adults, to validate it on another group of children. That's why we've done so many of them. Plus we also work on a condition called Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, which is a very severe form of autism. And by the way, they don't come back 90% sensitive, 100% specific. They come back so high off the charts. It's really, they're distinguishable. They're much higher in terms of their microbially derived metabolites.
Talk about correlation. Okay. Mm-hmm. Correlation.
So
right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we see improvement in them too, though. We had anecdotally, we had a woman start talking in her 40s after MTT. So it's a 12-week protocol. We have tried it in liquid form, capsule form, and powder form for those who can't swallow capsules. Mm-hmm. So our current version is powder form. You mix it into a little bit of milk, about 3 tablespoons. And then you drink it once a day after the vancomycin treatment. So what we do is it's a complete system. You first take antibiotics to completely wash or to completely kill the gut bacteria that we know make p-Cresol, that we know make, some of these really harmful metabolites. Then you do a complete, like a bowel cleanse, one you'd have for a colonoscopy to clear out everything that's left in there. And then the next day you start with the powdered form of the MTT. And symptoms usually don't necessarily improve immediately. You'll see some benefit in the first few weeks, but what's really cool about this treatment is the maximum benefits, and it's still going at this point. At 2 years, you're better off than you were right after treatment.
Because it implants, it actually takes.
And we've shown that, in published studies before, that it actually does engraft.
Wow. And I'm not sure if you can share that, but the source of your fecal matter, is it specific, very healthy subjects, or does it change per?
It's extremely healthy subjects. We have a very, very dedicated team at the University of Minnesota who are our partners and have been for 10 years on this one. They've spent so much time refining it, getting it into a powder package version that can be distributed and easily mixed into anything. If your kid is dairy free, you can use soy milk. You just need some kind of medium to get it into their stomach. And then we do give them an antacid 5 minutes before, so they survive the stomach acid.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And then it gets into, we usually want it to hit right about the small bowel, because we've just learned that the colon's too late. So.
Amazing. Oh my God. So it's right there. This is going to drive me crazy. So it's actually right there. It's actually available, but it's far.
But it's not. It is, but it's not.
But that's why I asked about funding. So again, for our audience, so you guys understand, like, solutions are there. It's just there are obstacles to getting them. It's not because they don't exist. It's just obstacles, which is time and money. But at the end of time and money is the actual solution, which is kind of frustrating. But hopefully anyone listening here can make it happen. So, and we'll put that in the show notes about how people can invest into this clinical study.
And for more information, we have a lot of it. Just go to our website, gbat.com. You'll learn more about what we do, what the gut-brain axis does. There's a lot of educational information on there, as well as, places where you can sign up to attend one of our meetings to invest.
Wonderful. Oh, I love that. Okay, great. Okay, so just building again on MTT. So practical follow-up. So if a child tests positive for elevated MDM, so now we have the test that you developed. So would it make sense for the parents now, since your very healthy subjects are not yet available to us, so would it make sense for the parents and the siblings in that household to take the test, and then both to understand whether the rest of the family carries the same gut signature, or to see if anyone in the family with a clean profile could potentially be a candidate for MTT?
People have died that way. We highly do not recommend doing home transplants because people have died that way.
Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so we go through a rigorous process of screening for every disease possible, but there are plenty of people who have just tried it at home and it did not go well. The underlying genetic causes in some cases are known, about 5%, but the rest of it, 95%, is considered idiopathic. I think we're just looking in the wrong place because environmental factors mimic genetics sometimes. So you could very well be right. You could very well be that the hidden heritability factor is in the microbiome.
Okay. Yikes. All right. So this is actually very important because I know for a fact that a lot of parents, because we're desperate, now we see the solution, we can't have it. So a lot of parents would do something like this. So you're recommending not to go down that route.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous. Okay. So wait for, I know what will exist, I'm guessing in the future, is libraries of MTT. And then for each subject, right, they'll be able to get that powder from that specific donor or a combination if needed. All right, guys, patience. I hate patience. Okay, that's fine. Patience. So one question I get from listeners every time when I have an episode like this is, how do I get my kid into the study? I actually asked Dr. Adams if that directly. It's been a little while, and he told me enrollment was closed at that time. So let me ask you, where do the ASU studies stand on enrollment right now?
Again, we're just waiting on phase 3 funding. As soon as it comes, we're ready to go. The last phase 2 study that we had, we opened up we sent out the email saying enrollment's open. We had enough responses within maybe 15, 20 minutes to finish out the study.
Yep, that's what Dr. Adams told me. So, all right, great. So we'll wait for funding. After funding is met, then you will open enrollment, and we'll make sure to keep up with you guys so we can let our audience know. Okay, so I want to close the science portion of our conversation by zooming out, because you and I are both caregivers. So what does this body, again, of research suggest about gut health as leverage point for the whole family, which we talked a little bit about? So not only with the child with the diagnosis.
Yes. So, like I said, Analogous offers a gut health test, which can be extremely helpful to let you know if mom has any issues, dad has any issues, because there's a lot of transfer. You eat the same foods sometimes, depending on the level of autism and what they can tolerate with ARFID and stuff. But you get a lot of your maternal, or you get a lot of your microbiome from the interactions around the people that you have, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of talk, back and forth about things like Parkinson's disease. So, p-Cresol and Indoxyl sulfate, for example, build up in the brains of people with Parkinson's disease at 9 and 4-fold over healthy people. So
just Parkinson's, not Alzheimer's specifically.
Just Parkinson's.
Oh, okay.
p-Cresol sulfate and p-Cresol glucuronate can actually be biomarkers in a subset of that portion too.
Okay. So wow, that's amazing, and it's measurable. So it's measurable. At least So but again, like, so before anyone can get, again, MTT, so the research suggests, is there any way to reduce that p-Cresol production?
Sure. If you go on a diet that is specific for someone with phenylketonuria, so you eat less than 200 milligrams of the phenylalanine and or tyrosine, or just phenylalanine, I guess. You need all the tyrosine you want, but I wouldn't, because p-Cresol is made from tyrosine. Yes, you can definitely decrease your p-Cresol. It's really hard. It's a medical food diet. You can't eat any meat ever. You can't eat pastas. You can't eat really anything. You have to take medical food supplements. That's one way to do it.
Okay.
There was a phase 1 and maybe even a phase 2 done on AST-120. That was stopped. I have no idea what happened for autism with that particular compound, but it did show some initial promise. Mostly you just need to get rid of the bacteria that cause it, that create it. It's a byproduct of how they make their energy. Okay. And Clostridia has the ability to form spores. So we do not recommend treating with antibiotics, because when you treat with antibiotics, but you don't put anything follow up, things like Clostridia and other p-Cresol producers are the ones that can insulate themselves, so that immediately they come back faster than anything else and they spread faster.
Wow. And that's why in your clinical studies, you do a round of vancomycin specifically before you do the MTT. but since we can do the MTT, so if someone does a round of vancomycin, the next step would be a probiotic then.
I would highly not recommend doing that because because it will come back harder and stronger in most cases. In C. diff, for example, you have a 40% chance of recurrence within a year because they don't follow along with anything after they give you oral vancomycin. It leads to just this decline where it ends up killing more people every year than car accidents.
Vancomycin.
No, C. diff.
Oh, C. diff itself. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And especially for our kids, which is, again, right, they're the ones that produce that. Wow. That's absolutely crazy. Okay. Wow. All right. So, also just before we move on, so MTT, you're actually helping move MTT in general through commercial development with, you said gut brain axis therapeutics. So where are you in that process? Is that also waiting for the funding?
Well, of course not. We're writing our studies. We're doing data analysis on all of our past studies. We have projects going that I can't really discuss, but we're using the data and the not only the metabolomics data that we've gathered throughout the study, but also the behavioral data to see what kind of correlations, insights, things that we can do until the money is ready to go.
Okay, that's one. Okay, so and I know this is going to be a super tough question, but high level timeline. So once you get the funding, what are we looking at timeline wise? Then you'll have the phase 3 study, and then are we there yet? When are we going to get there yet? Are we there yet?
We hope. I don't really want to give a definitive timeline because the FDA really is the one who decides everything. If we had the money in our hands tomorrow, hopefully sometime in 2028, 2029.
Okay.
Hopefully. But
we can do that.
That's subject to change.
We can do 2028. We can do 2028. Okay, so all right, you guys, anybody that can help, let's, just move things along, like literally. Just let's help these guys move things along. Okay, so
and shout out to, by the way, the people who have been financing GBAT thus far are not traditional VC investors. There are over 100 autism families.
So they're autism families. So I was thinking about that because actually a lot of our listeners are family offices and they are looking to invest, but in the right projects. So for a family office, this is absolutely a perfect investment, I think. So
yes,
yeah.
It depends on your finances. You need to be an accredited investor, which has certain requirements because you want to be protected from high risk investments, especially you know what I mean. Absolutely. So yeah, so you have to be an accredited investor in order to come invest with us, but the possibilities are endless. I mean, think about a first to market, therapeutic for autism spectrum disorder.
Yes. And by the way, I just want to make sure to throw this out there because I am part of a lot of also longevity groups and biohacking groups. It's not just the autism community. The autism kids, there are canary in the coal mine. And now you're saying also probably some of the Parkinson's patients are the canary in the coal mine. But to live longer, to live healthier for longevity and health span, MTT is on everybody's radar. So there's a huge demand for it, so yeah, hopefully a lot of people will listen to this and I'm really hoping you'll get the funding done very quickly so we can move things along and finally get the product in our hands and help our kids, and ourselves, frankly. I think caretakers should also be on MTT because we need our health more than anyone else, frankly. Everybody needs it, but we need to be there for our kids long term, and having Parkinson's or other issues would just be devastating for our community. So
absolutely. So many of the other disorders have been linked to the gut brain axis: schizophrenia, yes. Alzheimer's, MS. It's crazy the understanding now that we're or the insights that we're gaining. So as a personal just request, if you are a grandparent, someone who is older, someone who had their microbiome established long ago, if you get the opportunity to donate samples, we would love to see what's in your microbiome that's different than children now.
Oh, I like that. So give me specifics, like how old would people have to be? Like more than 80 years old?
Ideally, everyone across, the lifespan born before 1950, 1960.
Okay.
I wish that we had access to ancient, microbiomes, but that's not possible. I wish I could see my grandmothers, but I can't.
Yes, absolutely. Just like we have genomics, we should have also like a database of gut microbiomes for sure. Yeah, I love that. So we'll put that also in the show notes. So if anyone born after 1960 wants to donate a sample, that would be wonderful. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. Oh, that's a great idea. Love that. Okay, so before we close, again, I want to hand the floor over to you for a moment. So what do you want our audience to know most about the lab and your work right now? Anything specific that we didn't discuss that you want to direct people towards?
First of all, this is not with the lab, but I want people to know they did nothing wrong. I want every single autism parent to know they did nothing wrong and this isn't their fault. It took me 10 years to say that out loud, but once I did, I was finally able to make progress with my life.
Yeah.
Again, you did nothing wrong. This isn't your fault. Don't blame yourself. As for the lab, I hope that, whatever results you get are helpful and can help guide either yourself or your child in the direction which gives them the best life possible, which gives them the most happiness, which gives them the tools and the resources just to be happy, which is the same thing that every single parent, no matter their condition, their neurotypical status, we want our kids to be happy. And so I hope that the lab and eventually MTT, once we can get it through, are able to do that.
I love that. You almost answered the whole last question that I always ask, which is the magic wand question, right? If you had this magic wand and then tomorrow you have your funding, phase 3 goes by perfectly, and FDA, the whole process is really quick, and every new parent with a baby, or every parent with a child that's already diagnosed could have access to your test, and everyone who's tested positive could have access to MTT, including their caregivers. Like what would the autism world look like?
We would turn a neurodevelopmental disability into a preventable illness.
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Fingers crossed. That's my goal. That's my dream. That's my ideal world. I know I shoot for the stars, but that's my goal.
Thank you for shooting for the stars. And it's amazing that there's actually, there's a path. It's not just this thing in the horizon that we're hoping for. There's an actual path. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for the science that you're putting into the world and for the gifts of this conversation. So to everyone listening, the show notes will have links to the MDM paper, the p-Cresol review, the ASU research program, and Autism Diagnostics Lab. If today's episode gave you anything you can use, the most powerful thing you can do is share it with one parent that needs to hear it. Christine, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a great day. Bye-bye, Nadia.